If you are like me, if you're my age, old enough, you grew up playing browser games. You played browser games at school when you weren't supposed to, at home, because you didn't have a PC or a gaming console really that could play anything else. So you played browser games, and I played the hell out of them all the time. And I want to watch a video talking about them because actually it's like some of the greatest gaming memories. I feel like some of those games are actually so good and I don't remember any of them are called. I remember the first like game that I played a lot of, it was like a Barney World almost. It had like mini game shops. I'm actually gonna sound schizophrenic trying to explain this, dude. I don't even know. It was so old. But my oldest memory of playing this game was on my mom's laptop in her room. I don't even know what it's called, but I was listening to the Gorillas while I was playing it. That's how I know it's old. But anyways, back in the 1800s, okay, we're not going back to the 1800s to talk about my childhood. That's not what we're doing. We're gonna watch a video today about the entire history of browser games.
Pretty good chance that at some point in your life, you sat down at a family computer, opened up a web browser, and spent an embarrassing amount of time playing games you never paid for, made by people whose names you never knew. Maybe it was on a school computer while the teacher's back was
School computers were the fucking way to do it, man. I'm telling you, bro. You always get away.
turned. Maybe it was late at night when you were supposed to be asleep. The games had names like Happy Wheels or Bloons or The Last Stand, and they were everywhere.
Oh
on
my
every
God,
computer,
these games
always
are...
one tab away, and then one day they were...
Dude. I like forget these games exist. How long is the video? I don't know, man. Just sit back and relax. Holy crap, dude. Dude, this is insane. Happy Wheels. Dude, I was so bad at Happy Wheels. I was like, I remember getting made fun of. Cause like there's a time when everyone's playing Happy Wheels in the class and I booted up and no one would ever look at my computer. No one would look over my shoulder to see how I was doing at Happy Wheels. And maybe that's why I started streaming.
just gone. This is the history of browser gaming, and it starts long before most people think it does. In the early 1990s, the internet was not the internet we know today. There was no YouTube, no streaming, no social media. Most websites were text and images sitting there doing nothing. The language websites were built in, HTML, was designed to display documents. It was not built for animation or for user input beyond clicking a link. A web page in 1993 did roughly the same things as a printed newspaper, just faster to deliver. People wanted more. The first serious attempt at fixing this problem was Java applets, which arrived alongside the Netscape browser in 1995. You could embed a small Java program directly into a web page and it would run in the browser. A few simple games showed up, card games, puzzle games, things that barely registered on a screen.
But when this hit though, it had to be like this is the equivalent of like TikTok being invented to new Gen Alpha Zoomers. Cause like imagine all you could do on your computer is read. It's like the library becoming an arcade. Like it literally switches everything. Like that is so honestly awesome.
The problem was that Java applets were painfully slow to load, awkward to build, and had a consistent habit of crashing browsers completely. So they lingered without ever going anywhere. Meanwhile, a small company in San Diego called FutureWave Software was working on something different. Their lead developer, Jonathan Gay, had originally been building a drawing tool for pen-based computers, the stylus tablets of the early 90s that also never really took off. When that market collapsed, Gay and his team pivoted. They took their drawing software, rebuilt it around animation, and released it as Future Splash Animator in late 1995. Future Splash was not a game engine, it was an animation tool. You could draw things, set keyframes, and publish them as small, lightweight files that embedded in a web page and played back smoothly, even over the dial-up connections of the time.
Dude, did any of you guys have a kid in your class that would be like cooking up like a Stickman animation or some shit? Because I was always jealous of that shit. I always got kind of annoyed. These people were just better than me at shit. I'm like 10 years old, 12 years old, whatever, and they're like making like a fight. Making like a fight scene on their fucking computer. And I'm like stuck on level 1 of Happy Wheels. Did that in drama class? Okay, I wasn't in drama class. Okay, if you can't tell, I wasn't in drama class. I was with the jocks. So I wouldn't have been fucking caught dead in the drama class, but
The reason the files were so small was that Future Splash used vector graphics, which store shapes as mathematical instructions rather than grids of pixels. An object moving across a screen didn't require hundreds of frames stored as images. It only required instructions for how to move. Disney used it, Microsoft used it for their early MSN rollout. And near the end of 1996, Macromedia, one of the biggest names in multimedia software, bought FutureWave and shortened the name. They called it Flash. Flash under Macromedia started out as an animation tool with some basic scripting on top. Those scripts let designers players add buttons, simple menus, small pieces of interactivity. Game developers were not the target audience, and yet game developers started poking at it immediately. A tool that let you publish something to any browser, have it load within seconds.
I never understood what Flash was. I would always play these games, and it'd be like Flash Player Needed or something. I had no clue what I was doing. I was downloading shit that probably would not belong on any of the computers that needed. What's Flash? You're too young, Jade. You're too young. This is for the unks. This is for all the uncles.
Button presses had never really existed before in any reliable form. That was enough. At almost the exact same moment Flash was getting started, a college student in Philadelphia named Tom Fulp had built his own website. Fulp had been making games since he was a teenager, and now he wanted somewhere online to put them. In 1995, he launched a site called...
Totally off-topic ADHD moment, but Fulping sounds like something like NSFW. I'm up late Fulping. I don't know.
Newgrounds Remix, later consolidated into what became Newgrounds. In these early days, Newgrounds was mostly just Fulp's own work. His games were violent, edgy, built around shock humor, the kind of thing that in retrospect looks like exactly what a young person let loose on the internet in the mid-90s would make. The site attracted an audience, but it was still small and personal.
Sex, etc. Oh, I want to play that Teletubbies game.
When Flash arrived, Fulp recognized what it could do almost immediately. He started building in it. His 1999 game, Pico's School, a point-and-click action game set around a school, crude and dark and made on a shoestring, did something that almost no other browser game had managed before. It had personality. It had a perspective. It felt like it came from an actual person with actual opinions rather than from a corporation trying to put a game on the internet. Players had never really seen anything like it in their browsers. The site visits spiked. Pico's School pushed Flash from being a tool people made animations with into being a tool people could make games with.
How is this the only Flash game we have to talk about as the starting Flash game? That's crazy.
And Newgrounds became the place those games lived.
Newgrounds!
Fulp had received enough user submissions that the old manual review system was falling apart. He opened up submissions to an automated portal with a public rating system. Anyone could upload their own Flash games and animations. The audience voted on everything. The best stuff floated up. Most of it was bad. Some of it was...
Did balloons come from a Flash game? I remember playing it, but I didn't know it was a Flash game. It like became this massive game from that.
Genuinely extraordinary. And the community that grew around this was unlike anything else on the web at the time. But Newgrounds wasn't the only place this was happening. And the ecosystem that grew up around Flash games was bigger than any single website. Miniclip launched in 2001 and took a completely different approach. Where Newgrounds leaned into edgy humor and user-generated chaos, Miniclip was clean, bright, and family-friendly. It curated its library carefully. Games on Miniclip went through quality control. Parents were okay with their kids using it, which meant it got enormous traffic. By the mid-2000s, Miniclip was one of the most visited websites in the world, with hundreds of millions of registered users. Then there was Addicting Games in 2004.
Addicting Games. Oh my God. Addicting Games. That is a fucking reference, dude. I played the shit out of that. My girlfriend says that she would play a different one. It was called like Girls Go Gaming or something. Girls Go Games. And it was like kissing simulator and stuff. I never heard of that in my life. Any girls in the chat that are in their 20s maybe and played Girls Go Games? We need Pickle in here. We need the resident old woman.
By Nickelodeon, which attached the browser game world to a massive children's media brand. There was Armor Games in the same year, which became known for hosting some of the most ambitious Flash games anyone had attempted. And there was Congregate, which launched in 2006.
Oh my... Dude, this is actually just nostalgia baiting me. Is it just nostalgia baiting me under the desk right now? I'm getting nostalgia baited hard as hell. I'm getting nostalgia baited to completion all over the place. Congregate. Oh, Retro Bowl. Oh, Swords and Souls I played. Kingdom Rush I played. Dude, I play like all of these.
And introduced something new to the Portal model. Congregate had achievements and experience points for playing games, turning the act of browsing the site itself into something with progression. You weren't just playing individual games, you were building a profile across all of them. Each portal had its own personality, its own audience, and its own relationship. I feel like a granddaughter listening to her grandpa's old memories. I'm not that old. I'm 2001 born, man. I'm not that old. I'm still 2000s. Developers who supplied it. And that relationship was how the money actually worked. A Flash game developer in the mid-2000s had two main ways to make money. The first was sponsorship. A portal would pay a developer upfront to brand their game with the portal's logo, sometimes for a period of exclusivity, sometimes just to be the first place the game appeared. Payments range from a few $100s for something small to tens of thousands for a game the portal really believed in. Armor Games reportedly paid the developer behind 8.
Holy crap, this game. I want to make a video playing these old games because this game is so good. The Stone Age
of
game.
War, a contract worth $15,000 just to make a sequel.
War.
For someone working alone out of their bedroom, that was more money than many professional jobs. The second model was revenue sharing. A game went up on Congregate or Newgrounds, the portal ran ads around it, and the developer took home between 25 and 50% of whatever those ads made based on how many people played. This scaled directly with quality. A game that was genuinely good and that people kept coming back to could generate a steady income for years from a single upload. Neither of these models required a publisher, a retail deal, or a marketing budget. They required the game and an internet connection. For the first time in the history of video games, a person could make something alone and have millions playing it within a week, and people did exactly that. The specific nature of Flash as a tool is what made all of this possible. ActionScript, the programming language built into Flash, was approachable in a way that almost no other game development tool was. You did not need to understand memory management or graphics pipelines.
Cool math
if you could
games,
draw something on screen, you could write a few lines of ActionScript and make it move when a player pressed a key. The gap between having an idea and having a working prototype was lower in Flash than in basically any other context that existed. This meant the people making Flash games were not mainly trained programmers. They were graphic design students who had learned a bit of code. They were teenagers who had followed tutorials. They were people who had simply decided to try something.
I remember that bartending game, but not a lot.
It did not care about credentials. The flip side was that an enormous amount of Flash content was bad. Genuinely, irredeemably bad. Newgrounds especially had a volume problem. But the rating systems helped with sorting, and the community that developed around the portals was genuinely interested in quality. Newgrounds forums became a place.
Bro, I'm just like locking in when they do this. I'm like looking at all the names of the games if I played them because these are such classics.
Where developers shared code, critiqued each other's work, and taught each other techniques in public. Someone who made a rough first game in 2002 could be making something accomplished by 2004 because the feedback loop was fast and the audience was honest. A whole generation of game developers was self-teaching through this ecosystem, and they were doing it on games that anyone in the world could play for free. The range of what those games attempted expanded dramatically between roughly 2003 and 2007. Early Flash games were mostly short and arcade-like, built around one mechanic designed to eat 5 minutes of someone's time. By the mid-2000s, developers were making full RPGs, strategy games, physics puzzlers, and games that had written narratives and multiple endings. Stick RPG from X-Gen Studios.
If they pull up Strike Force Heroes, you're gonna see a grown man start to have tears. Tears, man, tears. If I see Strike Force Heroes come up.
Let you live out a life of crime or success in a stick-figure city, leveling up stats and buying property. It was crude, and it was popular because nothing like it existed free on the web. The Last Stand from Con Artist Games was a zombie survival game with resource management and a day-night cycle. Sunny, from a single developer named Krin Juangfanich, was a turn-based RPG with more mechanical depth than most Flash games bothered attempting. Desktop Tower Defense arrived in 2007 and was made by a single developer named Paul Preece over a few weeks. It almost single-handedly pushed tower defense into the mainstream. Pandemic, where you design and spread a disease to wipe out the human.
Pandemic was a Flash game? I met the app when I was a kid, but I never knew it was a Flash game. That's crazy. This is such a good game. This game was so fucked up, but it was so
population
good.
Was one person working under the name Dark Realm Studios. Bloons, a balloon popping game from 2 developers at a small New Zealand studio called Ninja Kiwi, started as a small experiment and spawned a franchise that eventually became a multi-million-dollar mobile gaming company. These people had no idea they were building anything that would last. They were making games in a tool that was easy to learn and publishing them to sites that would show them to anyone. The physics game genre became a particular Flash specialty. Line Rider arrived in 2006 and barely qualified as a game at all. You drew lines on a screen and a small figure on a sled would follow them. There were no objectives, no score, no ending. People spent hours on it anyway and shared their best tracks as videos. It was the first hint that the browser game space could produce things that did not fit any traditional definition of what a game was supposed to be. 2010 brought Happy Wheels from Jim Bonacci, a game with ragdoll physics, user-created levels, and the kind of absurd violent humor that felt like it had been distilled directly from a decade of Newgrounds culture. Happy Wheels accumulated billions of plays over its life. It also became one of the main games that YouTubers in the early 2010s built their audiences on, connecting the Flash gaming era directly to the rise of gaming content on YouTube. And then there was the side of the Flash world that had nothing to do with Newgrounds at all. Poptropica launched in 2007 and built a complete adventure game world inside a browser aimed at kids between.
Dude, I have to play Poptropica. I think I'm gonna play Happy Wheels. I have to play Happy Wheels. I have to play that again. I have to play Poptropica too. I want to make a video playing these games. Those games are so good.
6 and 15. At its peak, it had 75 million registered users. Club Penguin from Disney let millions of kids live out a social life as cartoon penguins on a shared server. RuneScape, while usually discussed as an MMO.
Too, bro, I'm just getting name baited so hard. These like all bring back so many memories. I remember when I played RuneScape, old school RuneScape, and I just like spent a full week, and this is like amateur numbers. I spent a full week just grinding fletching to like 85. I felt so fucking accomplished, man. It was like I, didn't really accomplish much, but I felt so. I loved that shit. I like won't play this game now because it's too addicting to me, and I won't get anything done. If I started playing RuneScape, I would never stream. I would literally play RuneScape. Colton still plays RuneScape? He would.
PG ran in a browser window and was free to play. And for millions of kids in the mid-2000s, it was the first massively online game they ever touched. Schools deserve their own part of this story because they played a bigger role in building the Flash game audience than most people acknowledge. In the early 2000s, many school computers had Flash installed as standard because Flash was used for educational content. Interactive textbooks, teacher presentations, school websites all ran on it. This meant Flash games worked on school computers, and students figured this out quickly. Cool Math Games, which had been running since 1997, positioned itself as an educational site full of games involving mathematical thinking. Whether those games were actually educational is a question generations of students carefully avoided asking, because the important thing was that Cool Math Games worked on filtered school networks that blocked most entertainment sites. What this created was a specific kind of childhood experience that a lot of people who grew up in that era still carry around. A computer lab, a teacher at the front of the room, and a browser tab hidden behind whatever you were supposed to be doing. The game was probably not very good by any objective measure. You probably had better games at home on a console, but you were at school and it was there and free and working, and that made it the best available thing in that moment. This is where the technology and the culture fused together in a way that is almost impossible to recreate later. Flash games were not always tech.
You new kids, like, you don't got like us. A lot of these games were blocked on computers too. Allegedly, me and my friends used to download Halo 1 on the school computers, and we'd play LAN. We would set up a LAN on Halo 1 in the class and have a Halo 1 like 4-man free-for-all. Like, you just don't want it enough. You just don't want it enough. Like, you can get around these blocks. One person finds it out, bro. I did this in fucking Photoshop class because I was like 2015 or 2014 or something like that. It was like a web design or whatever, or not web design, graphic design. And me and my friend, all like computers, and dude, we would just be in the corner of the classroom and we'd be playing 1v1 Halo 1. And you guys are like, oh, cool, it's blocked, can't do it. You just figure it out, man. If you want it bad enough, you figure it out. You go through the depths of hell on that computer to find it. Like, it's there somewhere. We used to play Cool Math games on the library so often they blocked the website. It's just so evil that they would take away the math from the kids, because I learned so much math from Papa's Freezeria, man. I learned so much.
Technically impressive. Many of them were not even good, but they were woven into the specific texture of being a particular age at a particular moment in internet history.
I'm sorry, pausing again. Club Penguin, bro, they should not have had like text chat in that game. Like, that was a decision for sure, because sometimes you're in conversations you're not supposed to on that website.
That combination of access, freedom, and the particular circumstances of being a kid in the early 2000s is what gives this era its weight for people who...
Bro, I remember it being like a thing where like you'd be in class playing Club Penguin or something, and it would be like people trying to get like a girlfriend in Club Penguin. Like, it would be like, I'm gonna get a girlfriend, watch this. And then, like, they go up to some Club Penguin girl, like a penguin girl, and they'd be like, hey, so I got like this really cool, like, what's it called? What are they called? Like puffins or something? Like this little buffy little balls. You want to come to my house and see it? And they would show them, be like, so you want to be my girlfriend? And that person would be like, yeah, I do. It's so fucking funny. It's like the new age Roblox. Like, people do that shit in Roblox.
We're there. But all of this was running against a background of technological change that would eventually threaten the whole thing. And that process started...
And I know that example is very specific. It wasn't me.
earlier than most people
I can never
remember.
afford a
The first
puffin.
cracks appeared quietly. JavaScript, the scripting language that had always lived alongside HTML in ordinary web pages, started getting dramatically more powerful in the late 2000s. Google's Chrome browser launched in 2008 with a new JavaScript engine that ran code many times faster than anything that had come before. Things that had required Flash, smooth animations, basic games, interactive content were starting to become possible without it. The larger problem was mobile. Apple released the iPhone in 2007. The App Store opened in 2008. Mobile gaming had existed before both of these things, but had never amounted to much. Now it had a platform that worked, and Flash did not work on the iPhone.
Mobile
Apple
games
and Adobe
were really
had
cool in the
actually tried to
beginning.
get Flash running on iOS in the early development period. Scott Forstall, Apple's head of engineering at the time, later stated in a legal deposition that they gave it a genuine attempt, and the performance was, in his words, abysmal and embarrassing. Steve Jobs made Apple's position explicit and public on April 29, 2010. He published an open letter on Apple's website
I
titled
still play the Papa's games on my phone. Dude, I feel like I could hop on a Papa's game and I could play it and it would be fun. Like I feel like a lot of the times I play simulator games and those like, you know, simulator slot games come out like Store Simulator. And it's just like the yearning to play Papa's game, like the Papa's Freezeria, Papa's Pizzeria. They're all just trying to get a lick of that fucking simulator shit, or like the new games trying to look at the old ones.
Thoughts on Flash. It was 1,700 words and it was not diplomatic. Flash was unreliable. It crashed browsers. It drained batteries. It had been designed for mouse input and had no concept of touch. It was a security risk. And it was not open technology despite Adobe's claims. Jobs ended with a line that was pointed enough to have been remembered ever since. He suggested Adobe should focus on creating HTML5 tools for the future rather than criticizing Apple for leaving the past behind. The response was fierce. Adobe's CEO called it an extraordinary attack. Developers who had built careers on Flash were furious. Critics pointed out that Jobs was being deeply hypocritical, that Apple's App Store was far more of a closed system than Flash had ever been, and that blocking Flash was at least partly about protecting the App Store from web-based competition. Some of that criticism was fair, but the specific technical complaints Jobs made were harder to argue with. Testing of Flash on Android devices in 2010 showed exactly the battery drain and crashes he had described. By 2011, Adobe announced it was ceasing development of the Flash player for mobile browsers entirely. The mobile battle was over. The problem was that mobile was now...
Wait, did Adobe make Flash? Am I like lost on that? I didn't catch that part. I don't know. I feel like
where gaming was going. Not all gaming, but an enormous and growing share of it. Casual games, the exact type of games Flash had always been best at, were...
Who in here played Cock, bro? I played the fuck out of Cock. I was always behind my friends with Cock, but I would always, you know, get the level ups, everything. I feel like I had a lot of fun. Never heard of it? You never heard of Cock? Dude, Clash of Clans is such a good fucking game. I could honestly download it right now and have fun playing it.
The biggest market on mobile by a wide margin. The same audience that had spent years playing Flash games on school computers and family desktops was now on phones, and Flash was not on phones. Browsers started getting aggressive about security around the same time, and this made things worse in a different direction. Flash had a long and painful history of vulnerabilities. A new exploit seemed to surface every few months, and because Flash was installed on essentially every computer in the world, each one of those exploits was a significant problem. Browser makers started adding click-to-play requirements, meaning users had to actively choose to run Flash rather than it loading automatically. In 2016,
that sucked for me as a kid because I thought I was downloading a virus. There's deadass times when I saw that and I was like, oh my god, if I click this, I'm going to download a virus, and my mom's going to get really mad at me and I didn't do it.
And like, blocking Flash by default. You had to go into browser settings and specifically enable it. For casual browser gaming, this was close to fatal. The entire model depended on frictionless access. You clicked a link, the game loaded, you played. Add a single extra step between the user and the game, and a substantial portion of casual users simply would not bother. Portal traffic started dropping. Developers started building for mobile, or for Unity, which had its own browser plugin for a while, before also moving away from that approach. The sponsorship money that had once supported a whole ecosystem of independent developers started to dry up. Adobe made the final announcement.
Yeah, but it just kind of moved somewhere else, right? Like they lost the Flash, but then you could still make like apps. It may be a little harder, but if you really wanted it,
July 2017. Flash would reach end of life on December 31st, 2020. After that date, Adobe would stop issuing security updates and browsers would remove support completely. The announcement was not a surprise to anyone who had been paying attention, but the specific date, the formality of it, made something click for a lot of people who had grown up with Flash but had not thought about it in years. Something that had felt like just a permanent part of the internet was going to stop working. The games were not going to be slow or glitchy, they were going to be unplayable. And this is where the story gets complicated in a way that the gaming industry was not fully prepared for. Unlike a game you buy on a disc or download to a hard drive, Flash games had no persistent form that users owned. They existed on servers. They ran through a browser plugin. When the plugin stopped working, the games would not just become unavailable. There would be nothing to run them with. Even the original SWF files, the packages the games were stored in, required Flash Player to execute. Without the player, the file was inert and the plugin was going away. This meant the entirety of browser gaming, tens of thousands of games spanning over 2 decades of creative output, was facing something close to permanent deletion. Most of these games had never been sold, had no commercial value that would motivate a company to preserve them, and had been made by individuals or small studios that no longer existed. There was no publisher whose job it was to keep them alive. The gaming preservation community had been watching this coming for years. Everyone thought this was the end. But that's when a hero arrived. In December 2017, an Australian developer who went by the username Blue Maxima, real name Ben Latimore, started a project called Flashpoint. The goal was direct: download and archive as much Flash content as possible before the end of life date arrived. Not just save the files, but build a working environment where those files could actually be played, a launcher with its own local web server that could serve Flash content from a hard drive without needing a live internet connection. The scale of what Flashpoint accomplished is difficult to describe without the numbers. By the time Flash officially ended in December 2020, the project had preserved over 100,000 games and animations. By 2025, that number had grown to over 200,000 pieces of content across more than 100 different browser technologies. Volunteers had spent years hunting down games from dead links, contacting developers to get source files, reverse engineering how games had communicated with servers so that server behavior could be replicated locally. The full offline version of the archive reached nearly 1.5 terabytes in size. It was one of the largest acts of digital preservation ever carried out by a community of unpaid volunteers. There was also Ruffle, an open source Flash emulator built in the Rust programming language, which aimed to make Flash content playable directly inside a modern browser without the original Flash player at all. Ruffle could not run everything, particularly the games built on the more complex later versions of ActionScript, but it ran a large amount of Flash content in a working state and was integrated directly into the Internet Archive, into Newgrounds, into Armor games, and Cool Math games, meaning classic games from across the era became playable in a modern browser again without installing anything. Tom Fulp at Newgrounds had been preparing for this day for years. He had built the site almost entirely around Flash. Getting it ready for a post-Flash world meant converting or re-engineering a library of hundreds of thousands of games and animations. Many of them survived the transition, some did not, but the fact that Newgrounds itself survived, that it adapted and kept going, mattered to a community that had been there since the beginning. December 31st, 2020 arrived. Adobe shut off the player. Browsers removed support. However,
I feel like I remember this happening, but I didn't really know the extent of what it meant. I feel like I remember being like, oh, Flash is ending, but like, oh, whatever. But then I remember like all the games I cared about was ending. I didn't really know. I never connected the dots like that was Flash. Like, I remember being like, oh my God, fucking Club Penguin's dying. Like, all these other shits getting deleted.
The end of our story, not by a long shot. What Flash left behind goes well beyond the games themselves. The line from browser gaming to the indie games industry is direct and traceable. Edmund Macmillan spent years making Flash games on Newgrounds before he had any commercial career at all. His game Ether, a meditative exploration game about a lonely child, got him noticed. His game Meat Boy, a precision platformer posted to Newgrounds in 2008, was played over 8 million times. Nintendo and Microsoft both contacted him as a direct result, and that led to Super Meat Boy in 2010, one of the most celebrated indie games of its generation. He went on to make The Binding of Isaac.
He made The Binding of Isaac? And he made Eugenics?
Became a multi-million-dollar franchise with physical editions, merchandise, and expansions still releasing today. The Binding of Isaac began life as a Flash game. He had to abandon Flash to finish it because Flash's limitations were constraining what he could build. The Behemoth, the studio behind Castle Crashers, grew directly out of the Newgrounds community. Dan Paladin's art had been a fixture on Newgrounds for years before Castle Castle Crashers became one of the most downloaded games on Xbox Live Arcade in 2008. Ninja Muffin 99, lead developer of Friday Night Funkin', came from Newgrounds. Friday Night Funkin' in 2020 deliberately looked and felt like something from the Newgrounds era of 2005, built as an active tribute to that aesthetic. It became one of the most played rhythm games of its generation. Bloons Tower Defense evolved from a small flash game made by two people into a mobile franchise with dozens of entries. The Fancy Pants Adventures found its way onto PlayStation Network. The tower defense genre, as a mainstream category, traces back in a straight line to the Flash portals of 2006. There is also something worth saying about what the browser game era meant for who got to make games. Before Flash, game development required either resources that most people did not have or a connection to an industry that most people were not part of. Flash changed that for a specific window of time. Artists who could write a few lines of code could publish games. Teenagers could post something to Newgrounds on a Tuesday and have 100,000 people play it by Friday. The games that came from this were often rough and sometimes bad, and occasionally
honestly, if I knew about this, I probably would have tried. I probably would have tried because it is kind of cool, and like the fact that you can really like it was so available for people to like kind of blow up from it was so interesting to me.
Extraordinary, and the people who made them were almost universally not the people the games industry was paying attention to. The Flash game era is easy to write off in retrospect. The games were free, many of them were simple, and they ran inside a plugin that the whole industry eventually decided was a problem. But the specific circumstances that created that era, a technology that was easy enough to learn that almost anyone could use it, a distribution model that required no gatekeepers, and an audience of young people who wanted entertainment and did not have money, never quite lined up again in the same way. The games are still out there. Flashpoint has them. The Internet Archive has them with Ruffle running underneath. Newgrounds is still there. If you wanted to, you could play Meat Boy tonight. You could play Desktop Tower Defense. You could play whatever game you spent too much time on in a school computer lab in 2006, and it would probably not hold your attention the way it once did, because part of what made it good was being 12 years old.
Scream when we say I'll wake you up, don't worry.
To do. That is what the Flashpoint Archive exists to prevent. Not the experience, which was partly about a specific time in your life and cannot be bottled, but the artifact itself, the thing. The file that proves that it was there and that people cared about it enough to build it in the first place. Without preservation, the evidence disappears. With it, someone who wants to understand what this era was can actually look at it, can actually play it, rather than just reading about it from someone who was there. Browser gaming lasted about 20 years in any meaningful form. It was chaotic and unpolished and often bad. It was also the first time in the history of games that anyone with enough curiosity and time could make something and show it to the world. And the number of people who took that opportunity and ran with it, who went from posting games on Newgrounds to building careers that changed the shape of the games industry, is hard to overstate. The plugin is gone. The portals are mostly quiet, but the games got saved, and some of the people who made them are still making games, just somewhere else. And yeah, that's the beautiful history of Flash games. If you enjoyed, make sure to like.
Dude, W video, actually, that was a fucking good video. It brought back so much memories. Like, I enjoyed that so much because there's so many memories from this era of gaming, from being in school and everything. Like, I actually just love that. I actually love that. Anyways, thank you guys for watching that video. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, trying to 1,000 subs if you're here this late in the vid. Appreciate you for watching. Let me know in the comments what your favorite browser game was. www.youtube.com. Thank you. Bye, YouTube.